The last speaker, I would like to let you know, we will be marching straight away after the speaker, Sparrow, the journalist and the writer of The Guardian. Please welcome him.
Thanks, everyone. It's nice to be here. It's also somewhat strange to be here. I don't know if you can see from where you are, but from where we're standing, with all of those grasses there and the covering across the building, it kind of looks like you're staring out across some post-apocalyptic landscape, which, under the circumstances, is not entirely inappropriate. There is a problem with white culture, and when we're talking about bigotry, bigotry always reveals far more about the bigot than it does about the person being targeted. And there's a really good example of that. You might have seen a few weeks ago that One Nation, Pauline Hanson's old party, was calling a rally against a mosque on the Gold Coast. One Nation these days rails constantly about the Islamification of Australia, about halal food, about Sharia law and all the rest of the bigoted tropes. But what's really, really interesting is if you go back to the formation of One Nation under Pauline Hanson, there wasn't a single mention of Muslims or Islam or Sharia law or halal food or anything else. Back then, instead of talking about Islamification, One Nation was talking about Asianification. All of the same tropes were being used, except they were being directed against Asians instead of Muslims. In other words, the bigots stay the same, the target of the bigotry changes. And they change as the circumstances change, particularly as the West continues to go to war in the Middle East. Of course, the other thing that we hear a lot about is terrorism. Terrorism has changed the environment. It's terrorism that has produced this atmosphere of Islamophobia. But of course, if you look at the statistics, there is no country in the world that is safer from terrorism than Australia. And that's not me saying this. You can check the statistics. There are websites that collect all this information. There hasn't been a single Australian killed by terrorism in this country since the 1970s. Yeah. And but the comparison that is often made is you're far more likely to die from a bee sting. You're far more likely to be struck by lightning. You are far more likely to drown in your bath than you are to be killed by a terror attack. I'm talking about the government's definition of terrorism as something carried out by the Islamic groups that are being targeted. And I'm saying that you are far more likely to die from a bee sting than you are from these terror attacks. But the more interesting comparison, of course, is with workplace death. Because here is something that 138 people have died this year at their workplaces alone. In the same time, Muslim terrorists have killed absolutely no one. And yet the amount of resources, the amount of laws that are introduced to prevent this non-existent threat massively dwarf the amount of resources allocated to stopping something that kills 180 people each and every year. And it's not simply a question of the allocation of resources. They do this deliberately. They do this on the basis that if they can get everyone terrified around terrorism, we are far less likely to realise that our boss is running an unsafe workplace, that we're being made to work harder and harder, that we've been pushed to meet deadlines that inevitably mean that somebody will die. By the end of this year, if this year is like every other year, some 180 people will be killed at work by workplace accidents. And yet that barely registers on the political radar, which is obsessed with this threat of so-called terrorism. And the reason why I stress that is because it seems to me that the most important aspect of this whipping up of Islamophobia is to ensure that we don't notice the common enemies that we have. We don't notice how we all suffer from the bosses at work. We don't notice how we are all made Our lives are all made worse by the same people who are whipping up this menace. That's why it's great to see people here today. It might not be the biggest demonstration, but I think it's a tremendously important one, and I think it's very important that we keep fighting this.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Jeff is our last speaker.